A stunning admission has come in from the Trump Labor Department, and it's absolutely stunning. In an obscure filing with the Federal Register last week, the Labor Department said that with the near total shutdown of undocumented aliens coming into the country, that the stability of the domestic food supply is threatened. I have never heard of such a thing in my life. I've never heard an agency of the American government actually say that the stability of the American food supply is threatened. And I especially wouldn't expect to hear it come out of this administration who covers up everything. Well, it has come out. This is the most bumbling administration we've ever seen. You know, the whole time Biden was president, they said it was all a big disaster every day, big disaster, worst disaster ever. But I'm still waiting for them to tell me exactly what the disaster was because I didn't agree with Biden on a lot of things. And there were a lot of things I thought he could have done a lot better, but I still don't see a huge disaster. I do see things he could have done better, but I also see a lot of things he did well. So to me, that's the difference between this administration and the last one. I don't see anything this one's doing well, including how they have proposed to fix this problem of what they admit now is not enough immigrant labor to keep our food supply going. And they have come up with a solution, like you would expect, that will further exploit immigrant workers and at the exact same time get only this regime could do this. And at the exact same time as it exploiting migrant workers even more than they're already exploited, they will make it harder and less likely that agricultural employees will hire Americans. This is seriously, only this bumbling team could get this all so wrong. But I want to ask Christian supporters of this administration, because I have been a Christian most of my life and I was a conservative Republican most of my life. But when I saw Trump starting to do all kinds of things that were so not only unbiblical, but hostile to the Bible, hostile to God's word, I had to start asking myself, how can I continue supporting this man, even though he's from my, traditional party? So I want to ask Christian supporters of the administration to seriously consider what I'm going to tell you at the end of this video about how they propose to solve this problem by further exploiting migrant workers. And I want you to ask yourself if it's in line with biblical principles. And if it's not, you should start to question why then are you still supporting them? All right. Let's take a look at this article from the Washington Post. The Trump administration says immigration enforcement threatens higher food prices. In an unusual acknowledgement, the Labor Department said that tougher immigration enforcement is hurting farmers and the nation's food supply. That's kind of scary stuff. And the fact that I don't know about you, I've never heard that in my lifetime from coming from, any government agency this high up. So this is pretty alarming, actually. The Trump administration said that its immigration crackdown, it's immigration crackdown. It's admitting it. The Labor Department is admitting it. Someone's going to get fired over this. I can guarantee you that as soon as it becomes more public. But they say the immigration crackdown is hurting farmers and risking higher food prices for Americans by cutting off agriculture's labor supply. This is one of those things you don't want to mess with. This is, if you become president, this is one of your most basic duties is to keep the food supply up and running. Don't do anything to endanger it, as this obviously is one of the most important things any nation needs to survive: a food supply, a stable food supply. The Labor Department said in this uh, statement that they made in the Federal Register, they said unless the department acts immediately to provide a source of stable and lawful labor, this threat will grow. With increased funding for immigration enforcement from the One Big Ugly Bill Act, the Labor Department said in the Federal Register, which is the place where all proposed rules are recorded for the public to review and comment on. Contradicting comments by Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, that the U.S. farm workforce will become 100% American as a result of mass deportations, the Labor Department noted that Americans are not willing to step into farm work and the lack of skills to fill agricultural jobs that undocumented immigrants are abandoning. We don't have the skills and we don't have the desire. And if you say, oh, we're just so lazy and soft now, go look at what this farm work entails and tell me how many Americans you think could do it. Backbreaking labor outside in the 105-degree heat of Arizona, as one example, where they work their little hearts out because they want to get something to get ahead. They want to help their families get ahead. And they work their hearts out. And they're so thankful for this opportunity. Are we thankful for that opportunity? And then every season, every few weeks, you have to get up, pack everything up you own, and go move somewhere else to another farm for another season, for another harvest. What kind of Americans can do that? I mean, people with families can't very well do it. If you're married, you have children, this is not something you want to do. We don't want to rip families apart like that, do we? The department concludes, and when it says the department, it's talking about the Labor Department. The department concludes that qualified and eligible U.S. workers will not make themselves available in sufficient numbers. So, yeah, of course, there's some who will do it, but not enough, not nearly enough. This comes closest to anything I've ever seen the government put out that sounds like alarm bells should be ringing in our heads. This should really make alarm bells go off. This is this sounds like a cry for help from the Labor Department. The Labor Department's comments appear to be the first time that the Trump administration has publicly acknowledged that its hallmark immigration policy, sealing the border and deporting undocumented immigrants, threatens labor shortages and higher food prices. So they're admitting it. Trump's people are admitting it. This is not the liberal media. This is not rhino Republicans who burrowed their way into the Labor Department. You can't even say it's the deep state anymore because you have to acknowledge Trump has exerted more control over the personnel of every government agency since he took office nearly 10 months ago than any president in our history. So let's stop blaming all these, other things that you used to blame before he was president because he's wiped out tens of thousands of federal jobs, ostensibly to get rid of the deep state. So if he hasn't yet gotten rid of the deep state, then you got to start questioning how competent is this man? Because we know that was his goal. So if you're going to question the people he has left in place, then you're questioning him and you're doubting him because he has had full ability to remove whoever he wants for the last 9 or 10 months. Just think these things through. So frustrating. It's so obvious and clear to everybody. And then there's this group in the American population, this relatively small group, but big enough to make a difference in elections. When I say relatively small, I'm not talking about the fact that he won a majority of the votes in the last election, but not all of them are the cultists. Not all of them are the hardcore, we never see anything wrong with Trump people. I'm talking to these hardcore people who make up an excuse for him no matter what happens. All right. The Labor Department made this case in paperwork documenting a new rule that took effect on October 2nd that effectively lowers pay for seasonal migrants. Get this, it lowers pay, okay, for seasonal migrants in agriculture under the H-2A visa program. And that's the visa program for a special visa for agricultural workers who can come here if they have certain skills to, pick the crops and help with the harvest. But it's a temporary visa and they have to go back at the end of the season. The move is aimed at giving farmers easier and legal access to foreign workers to avoid imminent widespread disruption across the U.S. agricultural sector. Okay, that's pretty well and good. That is kind of what they should be doing. You do want to give these people legal access, okay? But you don't want to start exploiting them by lowering their pay. And you're going to be surprised in a minute. I'm going to show you one other thing they're doing besides lowering their pay. They're removing another protection from these immigrant workers. President Trump is strengthening the farm workforce and improving H-2A and H-2B visa programs, such as through the Department of Labor's new Office of Immigration Policy, which will help farmers have the legal workforce they need to succeed, a senior administration official said in an emailed statement, adding that the president is enforcing the law and prioritizing fixing programs farmers and ranchers rely on to produce the safest and most productive food supply in the world. And yet they put it in more danger than any president in my lifetime, as far as I know. Also, this is gonna this is gonna tear up MAGA because there are a lot of people on the MAGA side, probably more than half, who they don't want any immigrants coming in at all. They don't want this. Remember when Trump tried to do this a few months ago? They rose up and protested and got his attention, and he had to back down. He tried to do this a few months ago to allow these migrant workers to come in for agriculture, but they said no, and they shut it down. So, but now they're coming back and now they're saying we have to do it because if we don't, you're not going to eat. You can be a purist up to a point, but you got to be a realist when the food stops coming to the table. All right. The changes to the seasonal guest worker program offer farmers a reprieve that it says will create a bigger pipeline to migrant workers with other industries, while other industries lack such a pathway. Again, this is going to annoy and maybe infuriate a lot of MAGA supporters because they don't want any guest worker programs. They don't want anything that allows or that makes it easier for migrants to come here, or for foreigners to come here for any reason. At the same time, the agricultural industry is getting squeezed by Trump's tariff policy. China, bumbling administration. China, which has traditionally purchased agricultural crops like soybeans, corn, and wheat, has stopped buying soybeans and some other crops, hurting U.S. farmers. The New York Times reported recently that the White House is considering a bailout for farmers. And if you remember, he had to do a bailout for farmers in his first term. So what's the point of all this pain? All the pain was supposed to bring in tariffs that were going to make us rich, and now we're having to spend that money to pay it to give it back to the farmers so they don't go out of business. It's basically put farmers on welfare. This is the how to put farmers on welfare program, and conservatives are supporting it. It's really crazy stuff. The combination of Trump's economic policies, including higher tariffs and fewer immigrant workers, is starting to weigh on prices overall, including food. The consumer price index was up 2.9% in August, the most recent month for which data is available. All right, now get this. The new rule changes how the Labor Department calculates pay for farm workers on H-2A visas. It changes how they calculate pay. And watch, allowing farmers to pay migrant workers less. It also shifts the burden for paying for worker housing from the employer to the migrant workers themselves. You hear that? It's pretty amazing, right? And if you're a Christian who supports this administration, right or wrong, my administration, um, you got to think about this. Are you going to put are you going to put God first or put the cult first? Or in fact, I'll even just ask, take God out of it for a minute. You're going to put the country first or the cult first? But you got to ask these questions. They're going to pay these migrant harvesters, they harvest our food for us, less money and make them pay for their own housing now. And what do you think that's going to do when they pay them less money? Down lower in the article, I won't get into it now, but it basically says it's going to make American workers who work in agriculture, their pay will start to go down. So a bumbling administration. But as far as treating the migrants like this, and I think exploiting them and abusing them, the Bible is very clear on how we are to treat people who are on the low end of things, people who don't have the opportunities that others have. And it specifically mentions migrants and immigrants many, many times. It calls them the foreigners. And Exodus 23:9 says very clearly, you must not oppress foreigners. You know what it's like. It's talking to the ancient Israelites. You know what it's like to be a foreigner, for you yourselves were foreigners in the land of Egypt. So they were slaves in Egypt, and God is telling them, don't treat foreigners the way you were treated, which is perfectly in line with Jesus' teaching when he said, love others as you love yourself, and love your neighbors and love your enemies. Deuteronomy 27:19 says, cursed is anyone who withholds justice from the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. In other words, don't withhold justice from all these people who are at the bottom end of society. You got to treat them justly and fairly and kindly and with compassion. That's in the Bible. Don't say I'm woke for saying this. This is God's word. I didn't make this up. I kind of wish it wasn't here. I would personally, in my heart of hearts, if truth be known, like to abuse and exploit people and get cheaper food for myself. I'd like that. But look, we can't do it. If you're a Christian, you can't do it. This is God's word. It's very clear. So hopefully I've given you something to think about. Look, if so, I know a lot of MAGA people watch this. I don't know why YouTube thinks all the MAGA people want to see this. They watch for about 2 minutes and then spend 20 minutes writing in, angry comments. But look, if you get a bit of this, please think about it. If you're an honest Christian, think about it. You have an administration that's constantly exploiting people, hurting people, and God's word tells us not to do that. And so why are you supporting it? Start to question. Start to question. All right. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And I will see you soon. Take care.